What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Josh Button podcast. Today, I'm joined by Professor Matt McPeake. And if you don't know him, shame on you. You haven't been on YouTube enough because he's been with Globetrotters. He's got his own instructionals out. Tell us what's going on, where you're at in the world, and then we'll get into jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I am located in Canada. I live in Burlington, Ontario, which is kind of just outside of Toronto. So for anyone who's not familiar with the area or knows a little bit about Canada, kind of the Greater Toronto area. So Niagara Falls is about 45 minutes away from me. And on a clear day, I can actually see across the lake. I can see the plume of Niagara Falls, which is kind of nice. And then Detroit's the other direction from me, about 3.
One is beautiful and maybe the other not as much, but
Yeah, not as much.
we get a lot of guys from Toronto down here. I'm in South Florida, so during winter, it's funny. We'll have a few guys that are regulars and a couple new guys every single season escaping the cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Florida, Arizona, Texas all seem to be pretty popular spots for. We call that snowbirding here in Canada.
Yeah. I know that feeling too well. I did 10 years in New York and I couldn't wait to get down here on the weekends when I could too. So are you going to Europe this summer? Are you doing some European tour or are you going to be sticking local?
Yeah, so as I said before, I do a lot of coaching with the BJJ Globetrotters, and I've been really focusing the last couple of years on getting into camps in Europe. There's 2 camps that happen here in North America. One's in Maine, which is kind of a cool camp. It's like a it's like a going back to summer camp. You're sleeping in cabins, you're eating in a food hall, there's bonfires and all that stuff, and then you throw in the mayhem of jiu-jitsu. So it's a pretty cool experience. And then there's one in Arizona. My coach is actually at his club, Jay Page's jiu-jitsu in Phoenix. So I usually go to those 2, and then I've been hitting up Europe. So this year I'll be in Finland in June. It's the first camp in Finland, and we're actually going to be at the Finnish Olympic Training Center. So kind of have a run of that for the better part of a week. And then later in the year in October, off to Poland. That one's kind of a unique camp. They call it the Zen camp because it's like a Japanese village. I think it's like an hour and a half from Krakow out in the middle of the forest. And, it's a spa that this guy built. So Christian, who runs Globetrotters, he rents it for the week. And, you kind of literally can run around the woods like a ninja, doing jujitsu, doing cold plunge, doing, all that fun stuff, and just kind of like, meditation and zen yourself out for a week. So looking forward to those. Are both new. Finland's a brand new camp, and then Zen's been around for a little while, but I haven't done it yet. So it's going to be 2 new experiences for me, which I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Sounds like something right up my alley. Nice dream vacation.
So yeah, and I was going to say, that's what's fun about these camps is they take you to some unique locations that you may not go to, like Estonia. Never really knew where it was. Never thought I'd ever go there, but there was a camp there, and I'm glad that I went. It's a pretty cool country. So it's always a neat location, and you blend in the jiu-jitsu side of it, and then a little bit of vacation, and it's a nice mix.
Awesome. So what is your lineage? You said your coach was Jay Page's in Arizona?
Yeah. So, I kind of, I think like anyone who's been in it for a little while, there's always a little bit of switching around, and there's always a little bit of drama. So I started in Canada. I think the first wave of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was kind of the mid-90s. And Marcus Suarez moved from Brazil to Canada, and he was the first black belt to open a gym in Canada. So he has some affiliations across Canada. He's based out in Vancouver. And the original gym that I was training at, the one that I spent the bulk of my time, about 14 years at, it was under his association. So it was a Carlson Gracie, Marcus Suarez affiliation. And I was there for about 14 years. It was, back in that day, there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 gyms you could choose from. And you got to remember, this is, for a lot of people maybe listening, this might be hard to believe, but this was pre-internet. This was pre-YouTube. The only way that, you saw anything new was, you had a magazine from Brazil, you ordered videotapes, or you went to tournaments. And back then, at least for this area, jiu-jitsu was very tribal, right? It's like, that other gym in that other city, they're the enemy, right? Like there wasn't any cross training. It was like, we're the best. We've got the best game. The way that we do jiu-jitsu is the best. And that was kind of cool for a while. And, you didn't know any better. And then as I started traveling more for work, I was kind of like, I'll take my gear, I'll take my shorts. And, I was dropping into some schools, and probably when I was about a purple belt, and I started, training at some different clubs when I was traveling. I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, I'm doing things that they've never seen. Right. And then they're doing things that I've never seen. So this cross training thing made a lot of sense to me. So my coach at the time, he was very sensitive about that. So I kind of kept it to myself that I was doing it, but I was kind of learning some stuff, able to test it out when I came back home. And I was teaching, I started teaching leading classes when I was like a blue belt. So I would kind of filter that in with a little bit with the curriculum with what I was doing, and traveled more and more and more. And then Christian wrote his book on Globetrotters. I want to say it was in 2012 or 2013, thereabout. And I read his book, and he did his travel blog. And I thought that seems like really cool, like traveling everywhere, just doing jujitsu, dropping in. So at that time, he was only doing a couple of camps. One was in Europe and one was in San Salvador. And at that time, I didn't have the means to go to a camp, but I said, hey, if he ever does one in North America, right, I'm going there. I don't care if I have to drive, if I got to get in a canoe, right, I got to get on my bike or whatever. And he had the first U.S. camp in New Hampshire, so I signed up for that right away. That was back in 2015, so 11 years ago. Signed up for that camp, went there, and it just blew my mind. Right, I was just like, holy shit, this is what I want my jujitsu to be, and it's the complete opposite of what my coach wants jujitsu to be. He wanted to be insular. He was the sole source, wasn't big on cross training. And I'm like, that's not me, right? I see the benefit of doing this. So I kind of had that internal struggle for a while. I was teaching a bunch of classes. So I had that ability to kind of hone my skills as coaching, was competing a bit. But I was able to bring in some of these new techniques and kind of sprinkle it. And anyways, long story short, it kind of came to a head. And before I got my black belt, I was just like, I can't represent him, because representing someone as a black belt, you should represent how they view jujitsu and how they see that. And I just said, I can't do that. So as a 4-stripe brown belt, I said, I'm done. Right. And I had a bunch of people who were like, you're crazy. Just bite your tongue, get your black belt, and then leave. And I said, no, to do that to me would have been, I don't know, that to me would have been disrespectful, and it wouldn't have been true. And I said, I'd rather just leave and not have my black belt and kind of do my own thing and kind of hang out, train with my friends, and, it'll happen when it'll happen. So I left, got together with a bunch of friends that, had been at that gym, had left for their own reasons. And we kind of had a group of about 8 guys, and we were training at my garage. I put mats in 2 of the guys' basements. So we were kind of rotating between my place and their place and having fun. Ended up, renting a small spot, when it got cold, so we could train inside and not freeze our butts off in Canada. Obviously if we were in Florida or someplace like that, it would have been okay. And, and everything was going great, right? We were having a blast. We were doing jujitsu for the pure love of jujitsu, right? It didn't, belts really didn't mean anything. And later, so that was I think that was like in 2017, September, October 2017 when I left. And I'd been doing camps at that point for 4 years or something like that. And it built some really good relationships with people within the Globetrotter community. So when I went to the main camp in 2018, unbeknownst to me, one of the things that you can do with Globetrotters, which is kind of cool, that it doesn't happen so much now, but back then, if you didn't have a coach, right? Like if there wasn't a black belt coach around for you, and believe it or not, back then there were still clubs that didn't have black belts, right? And they were like, you can request to have an evaluation. So if you thought, hey, you know what, I'm a purple belt, I don't have a coach, I've been training for X number of years, I'm competing, I'd like to be evaluated, right? So there's like this council of black belts, we'll call it, and they'll all roll with you, and it's got to be a unanimous decision if they think, hey, yeah, you know what, this person deserves to move up to the next belt. Well, I didn't ask for it. They did it, and they beat the shit out of me for the week. And I had no idea. I had no idea what was going on. I just thought, man, these guys are rolling me really hard, but I'm loving it. And so at the end of that camp, we're kind of, there's like a big group photo that goes on. And, I think there were 1 or 2 other small, I think someone got a blue belt or a purple belt or something like that. And they completely surprised me, caught me completely off guard, and presented me my black belt. And I was like, this is the way it should be, right? This is the way it should be. You don't know what's coming. It's given to you by your family. And with them, there was no strings attached. Like there was no money exchange. There was no obligation for me to pay a fee to them or anything like that. So it was kind of a cool experience. And, I think I was the first one in Globetrotters to be awarded a black belt that way. So that's my little piece of, jujitsu history, if anyone cares. But it was a pretty cool experience for me. And obviously, when news hit back home, my old coach, I called him out of respect and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I ended up getting my black belt. And, thanks for all the time that we had together and, all that stuff." And was trying to be, cordial and polite about it. And of course, he said, see, he went back and said, see, he was chasing belts and he got his belts from a bunch of nobodies and all that, trying to, kind of protect himself and his ego, which was kind of interesting. That's how I've, and then jump right into at that point, going to camps and teaching and coaching, along that way. That's kind of how I got involved with them and why I stay involved with them. And it's kind of cool now for me to go to camps and see people that have started as white belts that have moved their way up to the higher ranks, and even some of them have gotten their black belts, to see them over a course of, 15, going 11, 12 years of seeing these people grow and rolling with them, and every year kind of helping and coaching them. So it's kind of a unique experience, and to kind of get a global touch with it is pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a rad story about how you got your black belt. That's
Yeah.
pretty individual. I don't think you're gonna find that else anywhere else.
No, no, not too much. So, and then I was, so I was kind of under the Globetrotters umbrella. We were competing underneath that. And then a few years back, Christian got a letter from the IBJJF because at that point, the Globetrotters became the largest affiliation in IBJJF. And I guess, I can't say for 100%, but I think that might have rubbed someone the wrong way. And so they said no more. So they said Globetrotters will no longer be acknowledged as an affiliation within the IBJJF. So you have an X amount of time to, redo your paperwork and get re-registered and all that stuff. I'd known Jay Pages at this point for a long time. Jay's a fantastic guy. So I was going through all this stuff and like, Jay's like, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "Well, number one, we're trying to start up a program. BJJF is huge here in Ontario. And a lot of guys are like, if you don't have your belt registered with BJJF, are you a legit black belt or not? You know, is that's another conversation we can have maybe later on." So he goes, "Well, fuck." He's like, "You're under me now." I said, "All right." So he just took me under his wing. And so Jay's, he's a 4-3 black belt under Karate, right? So he's got that lineage there. So, and he's got probably, I think, the biggest school in Arizona. Those guys compete in he's had guys in UFC, in ADCC, EBI, combat jiu-jitsu, you name the competition. There's always someone either punching somebody in the face or, ripping them down to the ground and choking them out at his gym. So it was awesome that Jay would do that for me. And he's been really helpful for us here in Canada and helped us establish the J Pages Canada Association so that all the guys that are kind of under me have that ability to use that association when they go to compete under IBJJF.
So a couple things that I was wondering when you were going through that is, do you think the days of lineage affecting how people think about our jujitsu, or what their preconceived idea of what our game is going to be is kind of going the way of the wind because of cross training and because of the evolution?
Yeah, it's funny. Like you'll talk to some people and their lineage is so important, and I'm like, I don't know. Just because my lineage goes back 6 degrees of separation to Carlson Gracie, what does it mean? Doesn't mean if Carlson Gracie was my coach, right? Maybe that's what it is. But because you're part of an association that has 200 or 300 gyms, I don't know if lineage is so much more important now as it was at one time. I think back in the day it was a huge marketing thing, right? Like, we're Gracie Humada, we're Hoyler Gracie, lineage and this, and we're Carlson Gracie this, we're Hickson Gracie that. And I think that was a big lure to get people in. But I think now that jujitsu's become more mainstream, you see with the UFC, they're even doing a jiu-jitsu league now. You're seeing, with what's going on with ADCC, more on the no-gi grappling side of it. I don't think it's as much. Those guys they want to get in there and they want to fight, right? There's a lot of wrestling pedigree that's coming in no-gi that maybe is as important or more important than whatever the jiu-jitsu pedigree was. So yeah, once again, is it if I look at someone and they tell me they're a black belt under one association versus the other, do I put value in one over the other? No, not anymore. I don't see it, right? It's like, show me what you can do. What's your knowledge base? How do your students do? And at the end of the day, are you a good person, right? Or are you a dick? Because if you're a dick, I don't care. I don't care how good you are. If you're a dick, like, that's great. I think it's more about the kind of culture and community that you build within your gym and your sphere of influence. That's more important now than I got my belt from this guy who got it from this guy who got it from this guy who got it from this guy. So
Yeah. It's super solid to hear that because I mean, you've been in the game way longer than I have. I'm under a decade. And to be quite honest, all I know is cross training. And all I know
yeah,
is, this gym had a really tough room and a lot of big guys, strong guys. This room was more technical and small. These guys are gi specialists. These guys really have the no gi game down. And I took something from everywhere. And I can't
yeah.
imagine what it would be like just to be solo, like trained.
And
Yeah.
listen, I tell you, it was tough the first time that I stepped in. It's one thing to step on the mats and compete when you got your teammates with you. And, if you competed for a while, like you kind of get used to that atmosphere, especially if it's the same kind of tournament that, you're going to that tournament again that year for like your fourth or fifth time. You're kind of in it, but it's a different thing back then, when cross training wasn't big, to travel and step into, you know, a foreign environment where you're like, I don't know any of these guys. I don't know what they do. Are they just gonna use me as like a punching bag, right? And just beat the shit out of me and I'm gone and take my $20 mat fee, or are they gonna be cool? Luckily, in my travels, I mean, I don't know. Pre-COVID, I was probably hitting 20 different gyms in my travels, like with work and all that stuff. So I got into, I saw a lot of different places. It hasn't been as much, since then, because I haven't been as traveling as much. And there's only been a few incidences where I was kind of like, okay, they're locking the doors, this is gonna be a fight for the next, hour, right? Like they're trying to see who's the toughest guy in the room. And, you just either get yourself out of there or you go, okay, it's like competition time. If buddy wants me to break his arm, I'll break his arm if I have to, but it's just a stupid situation. Luckily there's not too many places like that, but the one that I learned in traveling and, it was one of two things that would happen. They're either going to put you with the biggest guy in the room, right? To see how tough you are, or they're going to put you with the smallest person in the room to see how nice you are. And, and I learned that lesson a long time ago. And it's not like I was going in and being a meathead and trying to beat on anyone. But I remember the first time I went to San Francisco and I went to train at Health Gracie's when Kurt Osiender was still there. So I went there and Kurt was running the class, and, he puts me with, I don't know, I'm like, you know, I'm like 220, right? I'm a brown belt, 220 pounds. He puts me with, 110-pound, white belt, two stripe female, right? And says, okay, you go there. And I'm like, I know what you're doing, right? If I trash her, I'm leaving here broken, right? I'm going to be thrown out in the heat, but I'm going to play night. And I did. I've sat there and I was rolling, very technical, had a really good roll with her. And at the end of it, he's like, all right, he goes, you come on over here with me and the older guys, right? The master level guys, you kind of come over here. And he goes, we're going to let the young guys beat the shit out of them. We're going to come over here and actually work on some stuff and learn some stuff, right? So it was kind of cool to, you got to navigate that. And, I think it's like you say, it's a lot more open now. There's so much more cross train that's being done. And you're right. There's, a whole new generation of people that can't relate to my experience because they can't even fathom, like, your coach wouldn't let you go to another gym without his permission. Like, that's crazy. Your coach wouldn't let you go to a seminar without his permission. I'm going, yeah, those are his rules. I mean, I broke them. I did it. But now it's like, and it's the way that I've been with my students. It's, yeah, go to another gym. If you got a buddy that trains in another gym, go there. See what, find out what they're doing, right? And bring it back. Like, teach me something. Like, go learn something that I don't do. Like, you can't be everything to everyone. And I think that's where some coaches kind of lose it. They think, oh, I'm a black belt now. And I'll get that with guys that I know that get their black belt and they're like really nervous, right? Like, they feel that they're an imposter. And they're like, I don't know if I don't deserve it. Like, I don't know this. And I go, no, no one expects you to know everything. It's impossible to be a leg lock expert and a lapel guard expert and a wrestling expert and a this expert. You just can't do it, right? You got to understand, and kind of where my philosophy comes into. You got to understand concepts that you can apply to all situations, but you don't have to be the expert. And you've got to, everyone says check your ego at the door, but there's a lot of ego in jujitsu. But you got to check your ego as a coach and say, you know what? If I got a student who's, they're driven and they have that talent to learn leg locks, and I'm not the best leg lock person, get them the resources to become a good leg locker. And then what's going to happen? They're going to bring that skill back and they're going to force you to become a better leg locker. They're going to force everyone else in the gym to be a better leg locker. And I think that's the thing that I like to see now when I'm traveling around is just the wealth of experience. And I see like blue belts and purple belts doing stuff going like, holy shit, like these guys are way better than I was at that level. Way better. Right. They know so much more. They're so much more technical. And there's so much more fluid in it. And I think that's just from that experience of cross training and that cross pollination and just seeing so much. And I think sometimes with social media and the internet, it's information overload at times. And I think people can get lost very easily, trying to collect techniques and wanting to do the coolest thing that's there rather than learn the fundamentals, learn why things work. And then when you learn the concepts behind like guard passing, the concepts of guard passing, it doesn't matter what guard it is. I don't care if it's gi or no gi. If you understand the few fundamental things that have to happen at any guard pass, then you can play around with the technique of the week, right? The hottest thing that's out there and you can understand it. And I think that's where people kind of get lost or always, kind of collecting techniques. And I think that's the part of the coach is like, whoa, settle down. Like that's cool. Right. But you're trying to do something, you're trying to do, you know, some weird ass, leg lock submission, but yet you have zero guard retention, right? Or you can't pass someone's guard. Let's learn about passing guard and guard retention first, because that's going to be more important to you at the end of the day than learning something now that maybe 3 months from now you're going to completely forget and you're not going to use anymore. So I think there's a good thing that there's a lot of information out there, but I think that's part of the coach now is to help, their students figure out like, how do you bring that back in? Because, the jiu-jitsu universe is so big and you want to come back into such a small, what's going to work for you. And that's what I said to people that I learned when I got my black belt is, you kind of see how big the ocean is, right? And if you're, and you got to boil that ocean, 1 tablespoon at a time. And it's almost an impossible feat to do. So you got to figure out what works for you and kind of design that game, if you're competing, design that mat that's going to work for you. Are you a takedown guy or a guard puller? Are you a guard passer or are you going to be a sweep guy? What's your submissions? Are you going to be a leg locker or are you going to be an upper body guy? And come up with that game plan that's going to work for you. And no matter who you're rolling with, no matter what their A game is, you break it down and then impose your A game on that. And I think when you start doing that, I think it makes it a little bit easier for them to consume and kind of give them a little bit of guardrails. Like it's fun to experiment, but I just find that information overload can really derail some people. And I think that's why maybe some people don't progress as much as others, or you get other people that are just, they're savants at it. I've got one student, I literally show him something once and he's using it, right? He's right away. He'll get it on 8 out of 10 people, and those 2 people he can't get, he'll come back and say, hey, when I did it, they did this and this. What am I doing wrong? Show me. Here's the correction. And then he'll go and get it on those 2 people, the next time he rolls with them. You got to kind of gauge who can consume a lot of information and who needs to be spoon fed.
Yeah, I honestly saw my game completely change and adapt for the better when I really started focusing on myself in the bad spot and learning to deal with that first, defend myself first, and then focusing on certain things systematically in big grouping of time.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when you look at how we teach, and I'll say jujitsu, like I've been in martial arts since I was 8 years old, right? So I've been around, I've done judo, kickboxing, hapkido, Japanese jiu-jitsu. I've done a whole bunch of stuff. And the one thing that I find that was kind of weird in jiu-jitsu, like let's say the other true contact combat sports like boxing and wrestling. Boxing and wrestling, the first thing you learn is defense, right? Where do your hands go, right? To protect you from the punch. Where do your hand go to protect your legs and your hips and your head in wrestling? And what do we do in jiu-jitsu? Okay, lay on the ground, guy's going to put you in half guard, escape. Well, man, there's a lot of things that have happened to get there. Well, let's figure out how we defend ourselves and stop that. So I always found it kind of weird that we just it was like a shotgun approach a lot to jujitsu. And I found it was like very disconnected. Like, okay, this week we're going to work on, mount. And then, you go back to the next class and now we're working on takedowns. And the next class, now we're working on arm bars. Like it was so disjointed. So as I went through learning how to be a coach, be an instructor, the biggest thing for me was, you got to chain things together, and it's not about techniques. To me, it's about concepts. So I need to teach you a fundamental concept and reinforce it with a technique. So it's kind of like the ecological approach, right? But without using all the big fancy words is to, and so what I would try to do is say we would take, 4 to 6 weeks. Over this 4 to 6 weeks period, we're going to work on mount, top and bottom. And we're going to start at point A and we're going to go as far as we can in 6 weeks. And I'm going to mark where we stop. So the next time that subject comes back into the rotation, I'm going to take it back 2 steps so that everyone kind of refreshes. And we're going to build upon that. So I think it's a good way if you've got a mixed class of experience from, beginners to more advanced people, right? You can kind of get them into the mix. And it also gives you a longer period of time to actually see how things work and get the concepts. Because if I just go a class on arm bars, right? Right. And how many times have you sat there and your coach has shown something like 3 times, who needs to see it again? He shows it 3 more times. Okay, go off and do it. And you see half the people are like, what am I supposed to do? Right. That's not a valuable use of your time. But, if you say, hey, we're going to practice, guard passing. And first thing we got to do is we got to control that position between the feet and the knees. Go, right? With resistance, guy in the bottom for 3 minutes, guy in top for 3 minutes, kind of the ecological way you make it a game. And then they get that. Then you say, okay, now we're going to control the knees to the hips, and we're going to control the hips, and we're going to do it upper body. You do that for 4 to 6 weeks, those guys are passing everyone's guard, right? Or they're learning very quickly on the bottom how to defend that and get their guard retention because it's drilled into them live, right? And it's not complicated like going, oh, my hand needs to be, this hand goes here on step 17 and my foot goes here on step 21, right? They just know like my hands and feet need to end up being here and I need to control this and this and this. And I've got it, right? A simple 3 or 4 step check off. Guy on top knows what he needs to do and the person on the bottom knows what they need to prevent. And that's how I found for me, I really accelerated my learning was watching people teach technique, but picking up on what's the fundamental 2 or 3 things that they're doing that makes that work. And then I was able to jump right in and make it work for me because 17 steps might work for you, but maybe 3 of those 17 steps completely screw up my flow and I don't really need them, right? Or maybe I need to add 2 or 3 different steps to get to the same place that you do. But as long as you're getting from point A to point B, if you can do it in 17 steps and I can do it in 3, who cares? Right? That's my game. That's your game. But we're both, we're both getting there. So I think that's where it was a real kind of aha moment for me. And it was almost like unlocking the matrix. And I can specifically remember when it happened. And I was at a camp. I was at a Globetrotters camp in Maine. And one of the black belts that was there, really guy that I really liked, Jay Bell. And Jay was like, old school, top pressure, grindy guy. And I was like, man, every time he pins me, like I can't move. And it's not that like I feel weight. It's just I can't move. It's like I've been tie wrapped to the floor and I couldn't figure it out. And then I watched him teaching what his technique was. And I was watching his body. I wasn't listening to what he was saying. I was watching his body and I saw something and I went, motherfucker, there it is. There it is. I can see exactly what he's doing. And we went back and we started drilling the technique and all I focused on was that one thing. And my partner that I was training with, who was, was kind of, let's say he was getting up 50% of the time. It was it. It was done. He's pinned or he couldn't get up. And I went, okay, I need to change the way that I'm approaching this and start looking for these things. And that's what's worked for me. And I've had a fairly high levels of success translating that to my students. And then to the guys that are black belts under me and they kind of translate it and I see it work. that way. So it was kind of funny when the ecological approach kind of came out. I'm like, man, I read those books. I read some of those books like years before. And I go, I guess I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it necessarily the way that they define it. And I know when you get into that debate of ecological versus traditional, and you say, well, it's kind of a mixture of both, you'll say, well, no, you can't do that. It's got to be one or the other. Anyways, I think concepts really lead the way. And however you want to call that concept, if you call it ecological, if you call it situational sparring
Yeah.
or drilling or whatever it is, I don't know, but if you can convey exactly why it works, like the two or three things of why this works, I think that's what really opens up the eyes to people to then put their flavor on and develop their jujitsu. Because you remember, it's an art, right? It's an art. You know, we can all go to an art class and the teacher can tell you, use this brush, use this paint, up and down, left or right, and we're all going to come up with something different. Some of us are going to be, and other of us are going to be no better than, a chimpanzee, on LSD, right?
Stick figures.
Yeah, exactly. But you're doing it, right? If the thing is, draw me a person, okay, we got there. Someone's gonna do a portrait, and like you say, someone's gonna do a stick person, right? You've achieved the goal.
Yeah. That's another one of those debates that I think is almost pointless, the ecological versus whatever else.
Oh,
Was we've literally only worked on 3 different things this year, but we're not calling it ecological. I mean, it's situationals. It's,
yeah,
specifics, I guess, is what it's been called for the most that I've been around, but it's the same kind of thing. It's like an hour of really active work. You're not just sitting
yeah.
doing static drilling and looking at something in slow motion or giving no resistance. And I haven't seen that anywhere I've trained. So I guess I don't know exactly what that world was like. Maybe it was really static and boring and slow at some point in time.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, okay, do 50 arm bars on the right, from guard, 50 arm bars to the right, 50 arms to the left, 50 kimuras, 50 omoplatas, and then, okay, go on. And like, then there was no resistance. And you're like, this is boring. Or do 50 Toriander passes to the left, to the right. And you're like, but when I'm going with someone in a round and they're resisting, it doesn't work because I really haven't learned why it works, right? And what I really need to do to get those knees there, pin those knees, and stop them from
Mhm.
rotating in. And I think that's where, as you say, the art and the level of coaching, and I think that's the big thing, right? There's a big difference between being a coach and being an athlete, right? They're two different skills. It's one thing to develop your own skill and know why things work for you. It's something else to be able to help someone develop a skill and their understanding of why it works for them. And why it works for you may not be why it works for me, right? In your head. And I think that's the difference. Because I've done seminars with guys that, you know, if they entered a tournament with 100 people in it, they're finishing last. But the guys that they coach are hitting the podium.
Right.
And I've been the other way around. I've done seminars with guys that are world class big names and they can't coach worth shit because they only know what they do. And if you can't do what they do the way they do it, it's like, forget it, right? They're not going to pay attention to you. And so I think that's a big thing. And I think that's what's changed a lot is the quality of coaching has changed. And I think you've seen, and I think a big part of that is it's the maturing process in jujitsu. I always say to everybody, you know, I have such a love hate for the art because at some point, you know, as long as you stay active and you're out and you're training, your knowledge level will never stop. Like you're never going to hit the peak, right? You're always going to be learning, but at some point, your body starts to fail you, right? I'm 50 years old. I don't expect I'm going to go up against a competitive, 25-year-old purple belt, right? And I'm not going to get thrashed. I might be able to pick out some strategies and I might be able to get them, but it's going to be, if it was a competitive role, they've got the advantage, right? They got the youth, they got the energy, the strength, the stamina. It's just there, right? And I think a lot of people have a problem kind of wrapping their head around it, like, wow, that black belt got beat by that guy. Well, there's age and weight and all that stuff have to do with it, but that black belt has got so much knowledge and can share so much and help, that younger athletic guy reach his potential way faster. And that's always said to me. I go, I don't want my guys to go through the struggles that I had to, right? I want them to have a better experience, and I want them to get their belts faster than I did. And I want them to be better. I want them to be a better blue belt than I am. I want them to be a better purple belt. I want them to be a better black belt than I am. Right. That's kind of where I see it. Uh, so I think that's a very important thing is coaching and being an athlete are two different things. And it's very hard to be both, to focus on both and be and really good at both. But I think now, as you said, like there's so many guys now that like started when I did that are, that have been in it for 25 plus years, that have been around, that have competed, and then now we're coaching that they can share those experiences and they can really see where things can develop and help people avoid a lot of the roadblocks or pitfalls that we had coming up. And especially now with the access to information and cross training, it makes it so much easier, right?
So you touched on that a little while ago, and I was wondering, with the information overload and how much is available on the internet, especially, and where the level of competition truly is with the youngsters, as we do get a little bit older. I'm 47, and I know a lot of guys in their 40s that haven't really been on the mats that long, but they're in this world as well. It's information overload. There's things that they probably shouldn't be trying to do, and the systems that you're talking about, the basics that we should be focusing on, are more important than ever. So what's your advice to somebody who's in midlife dealing with this as well? Like, where are the basics?
Well, and that's the thing is I think a lot of guys get into they get into fitness, right? They have a midlife crisis, right? They decide I got to get in shape now, right? And if they're going to the gym or they do CrossFit or high rocks or they get into running, triathlons or jujitsu, whatever it is, right? There just seems to be a point when guys now, you kind of hit that 40-ish age, there's kind of that midlife switch, right? You're either buying expensive watches and fast cars, right? And chasing younger girls, or you're like, man, I got to get in shape, right? Cause like I'm out of shape. My doctor tells me I've got high blood pressure. I've got, whatever. I got to get in shape. So to me, the number one thing is like slow and easy, right? Like, especially you got to remember, I remember I had this talk with my doctor one time, and he said, we were looking at training protocols and, supplementation and blood work and all this stuff and kind of optimizing performance. And he's like, the one thing you got to remember is, you still at that point, I think I was like 47 or 48. He goes, your ligaments and tendons are 47 and 48 years old, and you haven't been kind to them. So just remember that. Like you may go to the gym and go, man, I'm going to deadlift 500 pounds, but just remember, right? There's just, you got to take it easy and work your way up to it. Try not, you got to keep that in mind that your ligaments and tendons are still old, right? They're not going to get any stronger. If anything, they're going to kind of get any weaker. So I think that's an important thing is it's the pace. And I know it's very tough for guys, for us that want to get into a combat art and a fighting art, because we're like, it's a very humbling experience, right? It's a very humbling experience. And I don't think a lot of guys talk about this. And it's what scares me when I'm walking down the street and I see a lot of the kids today. And I'm like, you guys are victims. Like, you're just a victim waiting to be taken advantage of. And you'll get you get someone that comes in the gym and you can tell like the nervous, they got a little bit of bravado. They talk about, what they did before and everything. And you start rolling with them and, you've been around a lot. You feel that nervous energy, right? And everything's nice and tense. And then you take them to the ground, you take your back, you wrap your arm around their neck, and you don't have to choke them out. You just kind of hold them there for like 3 or 4 minutes, and they're struggling and struggling, 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 struggling. They can't get out. And I had that experience with one guy, young guy. I think he was this guy might have been in his early 20s, and he came in and, we were doing gi and I grabbed his lapel and he comes in and like hammer fists my arm. And I'm like, okay, well, that's all right. So I go, okay, I know this guy's going to it was just his reaction, right? It's his reaction, fight or flight. So I took him down on the ground, wrapped him up, and I held him down there for the rest of the round. He couldn't get out. And at the end of it, I could see he was a little dejected. And I said, I go, what I just showed you is jujitsu, right? I was able to control you so that you couldn't hurt me and I didn't have to hurt you. Right. And to me, that's what jujitsu is. So remember that, when you're training, is you're not here to hurt your partners, right? You're here to try to control the situation. And sometimes you're not going to be able to control the situation. So I think for older guys, especially where they may be, you know, maybe they're, maybe they're a vice president of their company and they own their company. They're coming, usually you've got some level of responsibility where you feel like you got some kind of power. And now you're going to walk into a room where you got no power, like zero. So I always tell people, like, just embrace it, right? You're not going to get hurt, right? No one's going to hurt you. Hopefully you're training at a gym where no one's going to hurt the new guy, right? On purpose. I said, you're not going to get hurt. Just calm down. You got to learn to breathe. And just, 6 months from now, you're going to be like, man, like you'll see a noticeable difference. And I always tell them, I go, your first night in jujitsu is your hardest night, because that's the one where, your ego is going to get exposed to you. Right. And, and how you deal with that is super important, and just go with it. Right. And that's why sometimes you see guys that'll show up for, they'll show up for a month or two and then they're gone because they can't take it. And then you got the other guys that after day one, man, they're running out like the next day to come back the next class and they got their gi and they're all ready to go. Right. And then, you see them 10, 12 years later and they're a black belt. So I think that's the number one thing is just check that ego, like literally check it at the door. You need to do it. Just embrace it. And I get guys too, like, oh, I want to try jujitsu, but I need to get in shape first. And I keep telling them, I said, listen, I go, I work out all the time, right? I work out all the time. And I'm going to tell you, I don't care how good of shape you think you're in until you do something like this: boxing, wrestling, judo, jujitsu, something where someone else is going to put their hands on you and impose their will. I go, I don't care how strong you are in the gym. I don't care how fast you can run. I don't care how many push-ups and pull-ups you can do. Those are attributes that can help you once you learn skill. But if that's going to be what you solely rely on, that's only going to last for a small period of time against someone who's less experienced. You get an experienced guy that's like the same size as you, you're trashed, right? You're going to feel like you're ready to die in like 30 seconds. So I think that's a big part of it too, is like, yes, fitness is a very important part of it for longevity, taking care of your body, the nutrition part of it, doing strength training properly, doing your recovery properly. That's all a big part of it. And I think that's something that people need to be very well aware of, because it is something where you're putting a lot of wear and tear on your body. And if you're living a sedentary life, you can get away with, eating McDonald's every day. But if you want to be fit and you want to do an activity like this, or any activity that's really pushing you to your physical, and I'll put to the mental limits too, because that's the other thing that I like about jujitsu is the mental challenge of it. You got to take care of your body. Because if you don't, it's going to fail you. And at some point, it may be a failure where something tears, right? Something breaks, and then you're kind of out of it. So, but then I see guys that overdo it, right? They go to the gym and they want to be the strongest power lifter that they can, but they also want to be the most technical jujitsu person that they can. And I say at some point, that's going to break. Now, there's things you can take that can help you do both. But at some point, I've known guys that have tried to do both. And at some point, you've got to give up one versus the other, because it's just too hard on your body to do that for, extended period of time, especially if you're like 40 plus, to put yourself through that kind of rigor, every day, training every day, lifting weights and trying to do jujitsu. At some point, something's going to break, either physically or mentally on you. And so, pacing yourself is super important. The other part, which was really hard for me, but I would preach this all the time. I preach it all the time is, if you don't feel comfortable with rolling with someone, you don't have to, right? You have the right to say no to someone. And that was weird, because when I was coming up, it's like, you never asked the higher belt to roll. But if a higher belt asked you to roll, like, you never said no, right? And I tell people now, it's like, you don't have to roll with somebody. For whatever reason, you don't feel comfortable, or it's just a huge mismatch. Like, you're 150 pounds and they're 300, and you're just not feeling it, you're worn out, whatever. It's okay to say no, right? But don't say no because you're trying to avoid it, because you're scared. You're doing it because of, the right reasons, right? It's just not a good match for you physically. Um, and I had a hard time with that. Like, I would never turn down a roll with anyone. I was always like, yeah, let's roll. I could be, getting ready to leave an open mat, and someone come tap me shoulder, you want to roll? I'd be like, yeah, okay, let's go and let's roll. And I said, when I turn 50, I'm going to start being selective of who I rolled with. Well, that didn't happen. So I'm kind of starting to do it now. Now that I'm a few years into the 50s, I'm starting to do it a little bit now just because of some injuries that were kind of nagging me on. And I'm going, I want to be able to use my arm tomorrow. And I just know if I roll with that big guy, it's just not gonna, I'm not gonna be feeling too great tomorrow. So I've started to do that a little bit now. And sometimes I got to catch myself and say, and I feel bad about it, but then afterwards, it's the right thing because I'm walking away. I'm uninjured. I got what I wanted out of that training session, so I'm good. I shouldn't feel bad about saying no, but I still do. But it's a smart thing that you have to do, right? Be a little bit selective about who your training partners are as you move up and get older.
Yeah, it's better than regretting it after a severe injury for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's no way you're in the game as long as you are and you're doing as many training sessions and as camps as you are without some like non-negotiables in the recovery area. What are yours personally?
Well, the one thing that I've learned over the years is, motivation fades very quickly, right? You can be motivated, like, I got to do this. And, usually people, I'm going to go on a new diet in like 3 or 4 days. And they're like, yeah, but I'm just going to have a chocolate bar or just have one bowl of chips or something like that. Right. So for me, it's just like, motivation fades very quickly. It's got to come down to discipline, right? And you just have to be disciplined and you got to figure out what works for you. For me, I like to put together, 5 to 6 week programs on a spreadsheet with a specific goal at the end of it. And I hold myself accountable every day to go and check, did I do my work today or not? Right. And I have enough self accountability for that, right? That I can do that. And there's days that, like last night, I went to the gym yesterday morning, had a really good upper body push day, felt really good. Maybe went a little harder than I thought I was going to go. And I was kind of feeling it later in the day. And then I was just like, man, I didn't get my cardio in yet. And today's like, I was doing like a 4x4 on the air bike, sprint day heavy. And I go, my legs feel kind of tired from the day before. And I'm just like, stop being a pussy, get on the fucking bike, right? In 30 minutes, I'm going to be done. Just do it. Right. And you go and you do it. And at the end of the day, you feel better and I can check off that mark. Right. So for me, obviously nutrition's number one, right? You got to understand nutrition, what foods work for you. I know you went through, I know you went through your trials and tribulations as a vegan. And I know people that they're vegan and it works for them. I know other people that like to use intermittent fasting and it works for them, and other people go on keto and it works for them. I think you got to figure out what nutrition works best for you, what your body thrives on. My body loves meat, right? Love meat. I like to eat meat. I can sit down and put 2 pounds of red meat down in front of me and I'll eat that for my lunch and I'm good to go. And other people, they just can't do that. So I think you have to understand, where you are. I think, talking to your doctor, finding a doctor who understands, I think, nutrition and maybe sports performance is worthwhile doing. Once again, sometimes that costs money. You got to determine, can I afford that or can I not afford to do that? So if you have the ability to do that, or just sit down with a nutritionist, you can pay a couple $100 and sit down with a nutritionist that'll help put it through. I think getting your blood work checked on a regular basis is important to kind of know where your baselines are. There's a lot of stuff now, especially as you get older, about hormone levels. And if you're, I'm not a doctor, but if your hormone levels aren't where they should be, that has detrimental effects on aging. So I think you got to understand like how your body chemistry is working and how foods react with you is super important. Hydration is super important, right? Especially if you're going to be, if you're going to be athletic or try to be athletic and be active like that, is super important. So I know, kind of watching some of your stuff about your protocol in the same way. First thing in the morning, big container of electrolytes that goes down to kind of replenish and refresh the body. And I don't think people realize like, you lose 2 to 3 pounds of body weight, overnight just from dehydration. It's not that you've lost 2 or 3 pounds of fat, you've lost 2 or 3 pounds of water, right? Either through sweating and breathing. So I think hydration is something that people neglect a lot. And the number one thing is sleep, right? That sleep and that recovery is so vital and so important. So I think understanding what your circadian rhythm is, like I'm a morning person. I naturally wake up without an alarm 4:35. right? And I'm up and I'm functional and I'm ready to go for the day. You know, if that's not you, don't try to be that, right? So I like to get my training done, and I've been experimenting with it over the last 3 or 4 months. I like to get my training done during the day, and I've noticed that I always had a problem with training at night. My brain wouldn't shut down, and I had a hard time falling asleep. So since I changed my training regime, I've noticed my sleep quality. So I wear like an Aura ring for tracking. I've noticed my sleep scores have gone from like the 60s into the high 80s and 90s, right? And the only thing that the major thing that I changed is that I'm not training late at night, right? So that my body and my brain have that chance to kind of slow down and kind of recover so that I can get that sleep. So I think, and that's the thing, you can do everything else right, right? You can be on point with nutrition, you can be on point with whatever supplementation you're taking in your training. But if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, it's going to catch up with you.
100%.
So I think that's important. You know, other things, cold plunge, sauna, massage therapy. There's so much there, and there's so much research that's been done on a lot of these things. Once again, you just got to pick what works for you. Like I know cold plunge, I have no problem getting in cold water. Doesn't bother me. Sitting in the sauna, I love it. Once again, I like the mental challenge of it, right? And there's all those other benefits of it. But I know the people that just cold water, I'm not doing. I can't get in it. Like they get in for 30 seconds and they're out. Okay, well, that's not going to work for you. So whatever benefits you might get from that, forget it. You got to find something else that's gonna, that's gonna work for you. But I think you've got to come down with as much thought and process and planning you put into your training. You got to do the same for the recovery side of it.
When you said you shifted to only training in the daytime, is that jujitsu
Yeah.
and weights, or is that just specifically your weight program?
So what I always do, so I train. I'll say I train twice a day, every day, right? And it's either you can see
But
my
yeah,
Echo bike there, right?
yeah.
That's that's my muse. That thing, I ride that thing every day. So every day in the morning, I do my cardio training on that. So once again, it could be different, whatever I'm trying to work on for 4 to 6 weeks period on that. I've done everything from, maximum 10-second sprints to I've done 100-mile rides on that bike nonstop and everything in between, right? So I've got a lot of programming for it. I hired a coach during COVID that was putting me through programs and all that stuff. So is that's a non-negotiable for me. I have to be on that bike. Well, I might skip a day, but let's just say typically every day I'm doing it, and I've got some performance aspect that I'm trying to do, either long distance endurance or power output, right? So that's a non-negotiable for me. Then the other days I'm either training weights or I'm going to jujitsu, right? So it's one or the other. So I'll kind of break it up. Like I used to lift and do jujitsu on the same day, and I just found it just got too hard on like elbows and shoulders, that it was just better for me to kind of break it up. And during the week, my jujitsu tends to be, it's more kind of flow and drilling and kind of taking it easy, like, kind of that skill acquisition. And then on the weekends, I go to open mats on Saturday and Sunday. And my goal is to get in, during those 2 sessions, minimum of like 20 rounds, right? So 10 rounds each day, right? 5 to 6 minute rounds, and kind of get my push and get into that. And then I go back kind of into taking the volume of jujitsu down during the week so I can kind of recover. And really what forced that was, or gave me the opportunity to do that, was back in November. The school that we were teaching at, the one school I was teaching at the majority of the time, I didn't own the school, but I was running the program there. The guy that owned the building sold it. He only gave us 2 weeks notice. So we're like, no more school. So it gave me the opportunity to be a little bit selfish and start training for myself again after about, 5 or 6 years of really focusing on trying to develop a program. And people are like, you're crazy. Like, why don't you open your own school? And listen, uh, I run a business during the day. I don't want to do that. I really don't want to run a school and have to do that. I don't mind teaching the jujitsu and running the program, but everything else I went with it, I don't. So that was kind of like, to me, the universe saying like, hey, take a break,
Hmm.
right? Take a break from this. I had some nagging injuries, a creaky knee, an elbow, a shoulder. And I'm like, you know what? This is going to give me the ability to take care of myself So that's what I started doing. And, finding places where I could train during the day, either in the morning or, early afternoon. It was kind of my priority. And I'm still trying to find a spot where I can do that on a regular. So I'm kind of like floating around and going to a bunch of different places and kind of cross training the last, since November. So we're going on, what, 5, 6 months now. But it's been really good. Like, it's been great for my head. Uh, my jujitsu feels fresh again. Like, I'm having a lot of fun. Like, every time I go to train now, I don't feel like I'm obligated to be there, right? I'm doing it for me. It's my accountability. And because of that, my recovery was getting better. So my cardio performance was getting better. My strength and conditioning performance was getting better. Everything was getting better. And really, the last couple of months, it's the first time I'm going to say in years that I'm waking up in the morning and I'm not like, oh God, my knee, my shoulder, my elbow. Like, it's like, yeah, yeah, my chest is a little bit sore because I did too many chest press, or I really, I did a heavy leg day or something like that. Like, you'll have some muscular, pain from a good workout, but it's not that joint, like, shit, man. Like, I don't think I can train today type pain. And it's the first time in a long time that it's been that I think I've really had been selfish. I know it sounds weird, selfish, to take care of myself and just take care of my training than have to worry about anyone else's. And it's a good feeling. So I'm going to continue to do that.
Yeah, it's more of a necessity than ever, I think, after 45-ish, at least. Like, if you don't,
Yeah.
it's gonna catch up with you sooner or later, and you're gonna have to take a longer break.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had just from years and wear and tear at the end of the summer of 24, I had reconstructive ankle surgery. So, like, the ligament was completely gone, two tendons were blown out. And that took me off the mats for a while. It kind of, gave me a little time to kind of heal up and reset. And then I came back and the ankle was great, right? The ankle came back fine, but I think I was trying to push it maybe a little too hard. And I just, all through 25, I had all these little nagging injuries. So I ended up having a partial tear in the ligament in my right wrist, which was horrible, right? Trying to do jujitsu. So that led to some issues there. Uh, I sprained my knee during this, and I was just like, you know what? I need to step back here a minute, and I got to start taking care of myself. And since I started and then started doing that, all that stuff's kind of cleared up, and it's been great. And as I say, it's been a long time since I've been able to wake up fresh in the morning and go, yeah, nothing hurts today. Like, nothing other than the little muscle pains. I go, nothing is like telling me like I can't do whatever I want to do today. And that's a great feeling to have, especially when you're in your 50s.
Yeah, I think that's the feeling that everybody on the mats really wants the most, but
Yeah.
we probably don't find it nearly as much as we should.
No, we should. But if we take better care of ourselves, and that's the thing, I think everyone wants to get to that next level where they're hunting for that belt and they're like, well, I'm not on the mats every single day. I'm going to fall behind. And then what I have found is sometimes less is better, right? Like, I know guys that have trained they're on the mats every single day and they progress slower than someone who's training maybe 3 or 4 times a week. And like, the last week, like, well, what's wrong? Like, why are they getting better? And I said, well, when you come in here for class and, besides whatever we're teaching and we're working on, like, when we do rounds, right? And I don't say specifically like work on something. I'm like, what do you do? What are you working on? Well, like, what do you mean? I said, well, no wasted rounds. Like, you should have something that you're working on. I said, every time I roll, I'm working on something. If it's like, today, I'm not going to let anyone pass my guard, right? Or today, I'm gonna pass everyone's guard, or I'm hunting for knee on belly, and I may not get it, but it's what I'm progressively trying to do. And they're like, right, and they see that, and then that's why that person's progressing, because they're working on, like, notice when they're rolling, they're always trying to go for that takedown, that guard pass, that submission, that sweep. That's what you need to do. You need to find something that, if there's not a specific task given to you for that round, that you've got something that you want to work on for you to get your skill acquisition. Don't just go into a role and just whatever happens, happens, right? You know, I mean, you can do that sometimes, and sometimes it's fun to do that, but not when you're trying to, kind of move up. So sometimes less is more, right? As long as the quality of, how it is. You can go to the gym and, you can do a ton of volume of any exercise, but if you're not progressively loading and challenging that muscle, it's never going to grow. And sometimes you can do more with 3 sets of an exercise than 15 sets of an exercise if you do it right. And I think that's one of those things too, is like, and I was a gym rat. I was, back when I was competing, I was probably training, oh God, I don't know, 25, 30 hours a week on the mats. Like, it was ridiculous. It was like I was come home, eat dinner, and then I was off to the gym. And, I we'd be on the mats from 6 p.m. till like midnight, you know, 3 times a week, and then other supplemental training. Yeah, it was like crazy, right? But then I think back, but you don't need to do that, right? And I don't, and that training, I look back at how we were doing it. It wasn't quality, it was a volume, and it was just sheer willpower that you were getting to a certain point. But it could have been done a lot smarter with a fraction.
So when you mention something like that, the first thing I think of is I journal.
Yep.
I go into certain like time periods where I'm like, oh, I'm not up to speed here, and this is what I need to work on. And I'll just write it down in a journal and then try and remember it as I go. And yeah, sometimes I'll find myself in the middle of a roll going, hey, I abandoned my game plan. But a lot of the time I do have it, and it is there for me that way. Do you have any tricks? Do you have anything that you utilize?
Yeah, and once again, everyone's a little bit different. So I know people that, when you're showing something, they'll like, do you mind if I write it down or record it? I go, I don't care. Record it. If you recording me showing the technique is what you need to remember it, do it. If you writing down, you know, high level points of what I'm doing, or you want to write down step by step what I'm doing, whatever works for you, it depends on how you learn. But the one thing that I did, and it was actually after talking to Christian, because he was talking about something that he was doing with the club that he was training at, is he gave everyone came up with a specific, I think it was a submission that they were going to do, right? And they were going to do it for like 2 months. And that's the only thing that they were trying to get in the round. So maybe it was, like it was a guillotine choke. So every time I'm rolling, no matter where the roll goes, like if you take me down, I'm trying to figure out how do I get your neck that I get a guillotine choke. And he talked about it. And then the guys went to a tournament and they were like beating everybody with whatever move they were doing. So I took that back to my guys and I said, okay, I go for the next, whatever it is, 4 to 6 weeks. If we're not doing something specific in our open rounds, I want you to write down what is one specific submission, guard pass, takedown, right? That you're going to work on for the next month. And the goal is to hit that 100 times, right? In the next month. And I go, and I don't care what it is, right? You want to tell me what it is? You can tell me what it is so that I can watch you. And when we're rolling, I'll do my best to stop you from doing it. But I want you to keep a journal. So at the end of the month, I want you to come to me and show me like, hey, I did it. Like my thing was, was a double leg takedown, right? Double leg takedown in week 1, I got it. I tried it like 15 times and I got it 3. And then by the 4th week, I tried it 15 times and I got it 15 times, right? And then we'll move on to the next thing. And so it was fun for the guys to do that. And the ones that took it seriously, I could see them doing it. And then other ones I'd go, how was your roll today? Oh, it was good. I go, the thing that you're supposed to be working on this month, did you get it? Man, I forgot about, oh, I forgot about that. Right. So, it was just kind of interesting, to see that you kind of give some ideas out there. So I think journaling is a great thing, or keeping a list, like keeping a thought of what I want to work on. And like I say, I'm very big on doing that, to say like for 4 to 6 weeks, this is a new skill or a new performance level that I want to get to, and keep track of that. And because if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it, right? So I think that's the main thing, is however it works for you to measure it. And I know some guys like to film the rolls, and I always kid them. I go, well, you're gonna film. I go, if you're gonna film your roll with me, right? It's going to be a good roll, right? But filming your rolls is another great way to do it, and it's so easy and accessible to do it. And then you can sit down with your coach and go, hey, I was trying to do this and I got stuck. And instead of me going, well, what were you doing? You can say, it happened right here. And then I can say, okay, well, the guy did this, this, and this. So you need to block this, this, and this. The next time you roll with them, try that. So I think filming is a great way to do it. And just having some journal, list, spreadsheet, whatever it is at home, a calendar, that you've got an accountability to whatever skill acquisition you're trying to get for if it's a month, if it's 2 months, if it's 6 months, or even if it's for a year, right? Some kind of contract with yourself. And I've known a few guys that have done it. They've literally written up a contract for themselves saying, I will do this by these dates, blah, 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 blah. And, and if I don't do it, there's this penalty. And if I do it, I get this reward, and they sign it, I sign it. And I'm like, okay, if that's what works for you, that's great. But yeah, it's just trying to figure out a very easy way for accountability and measure, so that at the end of that period, we can come back and say, yeah, you did it, right? Or if you didn't do it, why? And let's figure out what we need to do over the next period of time to get you to that.
Yeah. Because of the success I had with filming other things before jujitsu and doing a little bit of film study and just picking up on things I never would have from first person view, I started a video group with my morning training class. I was like, look, anybody and
Awesome.
everybody, you just know you don't have to worry about anything. Just get home. When you get home, eating your lunch or whatever, these videos are going to pop up on WhatsApp. You can do your film review, see what worked, what didn't work, look at the other rounds in the room. There's a few guys that'll go post their stuff on Instagram stories, but I don't think it's ever been a big deal for anybody yet. So we've had some really good trash talk in that
Yeah.
that chat as well, which
Yeah. Yeah.
inspired
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
good live rounds.
No, and I think that's a great way to do it, right? Because then you have immediate feedback. You don't have to try to remember what you did. You can see it right there, and you can see what that other person did. And it also gives you the opportunity to go back to that other person and say, hey, when we were in here, what were you doing? Like, it looks like you were doing this. And they say, yeah, I was doing that, but what you can't see is I was like doing this. So I think filming, especially now, it's so accessible, right? And I still find it funny that there's a lot of people that, like, they bring their phone onto the mat, and you're showing technique, you're going over something, and they're not bringing their phone. Like, I do it all the time. As a black belt, when I'm at a camp or I'm at a seminar, and I'm like, oh, I got to see this, right? I want to film it. I want to see what he's doing, so I can go back and go, okay, here are those 2, 3 things that make sense to me to why this technique works, right? Rather than write it down and kind of forget it. So I think that's a great idea. Journaling, filming, and then once again, just having some level of accountability, either with you and your coach, or you with one of your training partners, just so that they can call you out on your bullshit if you start to, waver off and decide that you don't want to do it, right? They can always say, it's like having your gym buddy, right?
And it's also one of those things like with your instructionals online, I can go and watch it, but then I rewatch it or I rewind a little bit. I pick up on certain things that I didn't pick up the first time you showed it. So having that
Yeah.
resource, having that there to be able to rewatch things like that, you will pick up on stuff. And if you
Yeah,
haven't watched
absolutely.
the Intro to the Power Line, go watch that Power Line Back Attack. Yeah, that series is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, once again, that whole power line came from just watching, to me, it's funny. When I first taught the class on it, using it as a method of teaching how to pin, right, and hold opponents down. I think I call it, pinning bigger, faster, stronger opponents. And so I'm teaching the class, and one of the guys who's one of the other instructors at Globetrotter, smaller guy, like 155-pound guy. He yells out, he goes, "When have you ever been the small guy?" Right? And I said, "Well, I go, fuck you, for body shaming me, just because you're a victim weight, because you're not over 200 pounds. That's your problem. Deal with it." But I said to him, I said, not joking. I said, as the bigger guy, I'd be getting pinned by 150, 160-pound guys, and I couldn't figure it out. Like, how the fuck are they pinning me? So I figured it out, right? I watched it. I saw it. I had that aha moment that one time at camp and why that guy was pinning me down. And I built basically, 6 kind of things that, as long as you're navigating through these 6 points, no one's getting up. They're not going to get up. And if they are getting up, they're going to expose their head. They're going to expose their arm. They're going to expose their back, so you can take advantage of it. And it's one of those ones that's very easy to, I want you to do these 2 things, go for 5 minutes and, beat the hell out of each other, one guy's trying to get up, the other guy's trying to pin him down. Right. And it's a very easy one that within an hour, as you say, like a training session, like training hour of actively applying the concept, people learn right away, right? And you can see their game and their ability to pin. So I remember after, teaching that class a few times at the camps, I would get feedback from people going, "Oh, I just want to thank you for that, because I went back to my gym, and, the bigger guys had always pinned me. Like, I was able to get on top of them, and they couldn't get up, and they were frustrated and all this stuff." And I said, good. That's what I want to know, right? That's what I want to hear, that this stuff actually works. Because the worst thing to do is, you show some technique and it's, and everyone walks away and go, well, that was bullshit. That works for him because he's big or he's small or he's flexible or he's whatever. So I try to, when I coach, um, outside for camps or when I do seminars, I try to teach a concept that if you're a white belt, if you're been doing jujitsu for 30 years, if you're 150 pounds or you're 350 pounds, um, you can apply the concept, right? It's not based on any specific style. It's based on get to this position, and this is why this position is going to work. And most people get it. I mean, you're going to run into some people that just have some physical attributes, like maybe they're not flexible enough for their size that they just can't do it. Like maybe a leg's not long enough or arm's not long enough. And they go, well, what do I do? And I say, well, you don't do this.
Yeah.
Right. And we modify it and we try something else. Cause I get that too. Like, well, this doesn't work for me. And I'm like, don't do it. Right. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if something doesn't work for you, don't do it. And to be honest with you guys, I go, I train with some wrestling guys, and I think it took me the better part of 10 years to really fully understand and grasp and feel comfortable enough and get through the mind block for me to blast double leg somebody. Every time I would go in, but it was like I'd go in and I get stuffed and drop down and like, fuck this, I'm not doing it. And then finally it's just like, just let it go. And it's like, oh yeah, I knew how to do this like 10 years ago. Why didn't I do it? Right. Or you see something for the first time and go, hey, why did I have to wait 25 years of doing jujitsu before I learned that? Because that would have helped me, like 10, 15 years ago in this specific situation if I'd only known that. So I think, yeah, that's important. As you say, those instructionals are fun. And like you say, it's a matter of being able to go back and rewind it and check it out and seeing kind of what you're missing. It's like anything else, right? You watch a movie that you saw when you were a kid and you watch it again and you're like, oh, that's something new. I don't remember seeing that before. So I think video is very, very important. I think that's the one part of the technology, of the information side of it that's out there that's really, really helpful, is that there's a lot of good quality, but you got to filter through some of the bad stuff and you got to recognize some of the stuff that you're like, yeah, that's not going to work, or that's fun. That's fun. It's like, it's like food. Some food is for fun and some food is for fuel, right? Most of my jujitsu is going to be fuel and some of it's going to be fun. But I'm going to rely on those basic fundamentals that I know that are going to work the majority of the time. And then I'll sprinkle in some fun on top of that.
All right. Two last things for you.
Yep.
Earl Grey.
Yes.
What is the Earl Grey?
Where did the Earl Grey come from? So that comes from I call it the teabag Kimura. So, or as John Danher calls it, the dorsal position. I call it the teabag. So I was teaching that at a seminar, and one of my buddies was watching it, and I was kind of like, you're kind of getting in this position, and the teabag, and I was kind of joking about what a teabag was, and my buddy rolled, and he goes, "It's the Earl Grey," because my gray hair, and I went, "That's cool, right?" I go, Earl Grey. So that kind of became like my jujitsu nickname is Earl Grey, right? So it's kind of played off of that the whole time now. So it's like the Earl Grey. So I had a whole seminar series, like it was like, the Earl Grey system to, getting to all that. So that's kind of where that came from. Just getting into that kind of, you know, person's kind of on their side with the arm up, and, you're sitting your junk right down on them and pinning their shoulders and the head there, and then moving to the Kimura or some arm positions there. So there's videos of that on, if you look it up on YouTube, you can see the Earl Grey Kimura, classes on that. But that's kind of where that came from.
So
Yeah.
around 2, maybe 3 months ago, two semi-famous surfers kind of reenacted this in a video, and it went viral. It was one of the younger guys had put in fake nuts, fake balls, and he hung it on the other guy's face as he was showing the move to his friends.
Yeah. The video that's sent to me by a whole bunch of people, like, that's you, McPeake. Ha 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 ha. And I said, yeah,
it was pretty funny. All right, the last thing I've been doing lately, and I like it, I think I'm going to go with it, is one word you'd like to leave the audience with, and why.
One word. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's only worthwhile when I surprise you with it. I can't prepare you with that one too much.
I'm gonna kind of steal it from a buddy of mine. He's got it on his gym, and it's like humanity, right? I think at the end of it, Um, Jitsu, and a friend of mine, he has his gym, and he's like, jujitsu is not about jujitsu, right? It to me, if you look at the community, especially where it's come today, it's a really good example of humanity. You have so many people from different walks of life, different age demographic, economical demographics, you know, ethnic background, religious backgrounds. But when we come together on the mats, that stuff goes away. Right. And it's about being human and being kind to one another. And, when I talk to people about that don't do jujitsu, and they're like, why do you do that? It's like, you're trying to hurt each other. I go, you are, but it's that to be able to put that much trust in another human being, like literally putting your safety and well-being, and at some level your life, right? Because things could go that could go bad, and could go the worst way, right? To me, that's what we should all be striving for, right? Get yourself into a community where you have that much trust, you have that much love for the guys and the people and the women that you're training with. But that, to me, that's what humanity is. And we've lost social media. There's no humanity in social media, right? It's gone. There's so much hate. You watch the news, there's so much hate and negativity on there. It's the one beautiful thing I think about jujitsu is that all of that stuff you could have. I don't care if you're having the worst day of your life, the best day of your life, or just a mediocre. When you hit those mats, whatever those outside distractions are, they're gone. At least it is for me.
No, myself as well, and I could not agree more. That's a great one, brother. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and your
Yeah, thank you very
instructionals,
much.
and I'll definitely point everybody towards your instructionals. But where else should we find you?
I'm on Instagram, Jits Rolls. That's where I kind of, I don't spend a whole lot of time on social media. I've tried to kind of detox from it, but I spend the time there. If you go on YouTube and you just, type in my name, all the Globetrotter videos will pop up there. If you don't, if, you can go on the Globetrotter site, or it'll come up from the Globetrotters collection. And then, and I've got 2 videos on BJJ Fanatics. If anyone's interested, I always tell people, go watch my free videos on YouTube. And if you like my style of coaching and kind of what I do, then you can go buy those ones. And as you said, I call them the power line, because that comes into the concepts of that I use from the top position to pin. One's on a modified Kezakatami position that I like to use. And then the other one's on the, I call back attack, right? It's a little bit different position than standard back attack. So that's kind of where I am there. And then, and if anyone's interested in reaching out, and if you see what I do, you want to chat, you got something going on and you think I can help you out, or want me to come down and do a seminar sometime, I'm more than happy to do that. I'll be down in Huntsville, Alabama in May, doing a seminar down there at, I think it's Pirate Jiu-Jitsu.
Awesome.
There. So, so I can be found those ways.
Yep. Everything will be in the show notes. And if you find yourself in South Florida, come train with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to be, it's like I said, I travel around quite a bit for work, and I always like trying to find new places. That's been the fun part about Globetrotters. I've got friends all around the world, so I can usually pack my no-gi stuff, or, if I know there's a gi stuff going on, throw that in there, and hopefully show up for a day or two.
Awesome, brother. Well, thank you
All
again,
right.
sir. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
You
Yeah.
guys,
Thank you.
you guys have a good day.
Yeah. You too.